If you happen to be following the Torah lately, you'll know that this week, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, the Torah portion, B'Shalach, is where Moses really gets to work. Allow me to set the scene just for a moment. I think it'll be quite familiar. After hundreds of years of enslavement by the Egyptians following the 10th plague, Pharaoh lets our people go. And of course, they take not the direct route, but a roundabout way on their way to the promised land. The Torah says that God guides them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And while they're en route, Pharaoh and his courtiers have what the Torah says is a change of heart. And they give chase with their army and they catch up. So now the Israelites are really stuck. The sea is in front of them. The Egyptian army with 600 chariots is coming from behind, and they are scared. So they cry out to Moses, what did you do to us? Taking us out of Egypt. They make it clear that they're prepared to go right back where they came from. They're prepared to go right back into slavery. But Moses says, have no fear. Stand by and witness the deliverance which the Lord will work for you today. So Moses goes right to the heart of it and said, don't worry about a thing. Watch, stand by and watch. And then, just like in the movie with Charlton Heston, Moses lifts his staff, the Red Sea parts, the Israelites cross the sea safely, and as the Egyptians follow, they all drown, although there's an interesting discussion about that another time. Well, and by the way, that's just the first part of the Torah portion. It's a great parsha. But Moses is now clearly the leader. But you know something? Moses would never have gotten this far were it not for one person. Remember, he almost didn't make it past infancy. You remember there was a hero, a woman. And without her, there'd be no Moses. And she doesn't even have a name. Perhaps you know who I'm thinking of. She saves the life of Moses. It's Pharaoh's daughter. You may recall that when Moses is born, Pharaoh had issued a decree that all Jewish newborn boys were to be killed. So Moses' mother, Yocheved, in an effort to save her son, builds a little basket and puts Moses in the basket and puts it on the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter is bathing in the Nile. She sees the baby, and she knows for sure that it's a Hebrew after all. What else would a child be doing on the river there? And what does she do? She has the baby taken out of the river. By the way, if you watch the movie The Prince of Egypt, which was the animated movie about the birth of Moses and his life, you may notice that this is not accurately depicted. And the only reason I happen to know it is that this was about 15 years ago. They had a number of rabbis fly in and look at the movie as it was going in stages. And I came in half a dozen times or so from the East Coast. This was my only foray into Hollywood, sort of, and not the only one, but anyway. So and they showed it in different stages. And at one point they have Pharaoh's wife saving Moses, not Pharaoh's daughter. So at one point, each time we'd come to Los Angeles, they would say, what do you think of X, Y, and Z? And I would say, well, I'm just curious. You made a change in the text. You have Pharaoh's wife saving Moses, not Pharaoh's daughter. And they say, yes, we're very aware of that. We thought that would make it more interesting. And anyway, and I'll never forget this line, God doesn't write great copy. And this is from one of the producers, and I said it with great respect. I said, I mean this most respectfully. I hope this movie does really, really well, and it's a great movie, and I'm just proud that you're doing it. I said, but let me make a prediction. 50 years from now, people probably won't be watching The Prince of Egypt, but I can almost promise you they'll be reading the book. And that kind of ended the conversation. But that's sort of the one change that they made about it. Anyway, have you ever thought what happened to Pharaoh's daughter? The woman who saves Moses? The daughter who went against the wishes of her father, who decreed that the firstborn Israelites all be destroyed? She's a courageous woman. What happened to her? The Torah doesn't tell us, but our sages fill in the blank. First thing they do is they give her a name. The name they give her is Batya. Batya means daughter of God, and they say she was a prophet. And further, the Midrash says that when the Israelites fled from Egypt, they took her with them. In other words, the brave woman who risked her life for the Israelite people was not going to be left behind. She came with a generation that fled from Pharaoh. And this was probably the greatest honor that the Israelite people could give her. That much I knew. But now I want to share with you something that I learned more recently from Rabbi Jack Reamer. It's about another female hero who is also not Jewish. In fact, this hero is from India. Her name is Sandra Samuel. You may remember just over 7 years ago, an Islamic Jihad terrorist went into Mumbai, and over the course of 3 days, they attacked and murdered some 170 people and wounded over 300. And one of the places that they went deliberately into was the Chabad house in Mumbai. They went into the Chabad house. It was the home of Rabbi Gavriel and Rivka Holzberg. The Holzbergs ran the Chabad house. They had been living there 5 years earlier. They went there to serve the small Jewish community there. Well, they were taken hostage, and later they were among 6 people who were murdered. There was only one survivor, a toddler, their toddler, the son of Rabbi Gavriel and Rivka Holzberg. Let me share with you the story of how this toddler survived. You see, there was a nanny. And when she heard all the commotion, she hid herself on the first floor, barricading herself in a storage closet. At some point over the days, she heard the child crying. And instead of running out, there was a lull in the gunfire. Instead of running away, she ran to the room, she grabbed the child, and ran out using the staircase on the house. Turns out, the day of all these shootings was the little boy's birthday. And you know what else it turns out? His name is Moses. The very next day, there was a memorial in Mumbai for the family, and there he was with his nanny. Moses was 2 years old. And now let me tell you what happened after that. You see, the next day, the parents of Rivka, the Rosenbergs, came in from Israel to collect their daughter. They wanted to take their daughter, their son-in-law, and the other people whose lives were lost at the Chabad house and fly them to Israel so they could be buried there. They also decided that they would raise their own grandchild. The Israeli government arranged for a plane to bring the bodies, and at the funeral in Jerusalem, the prime minister was there, and the president were there, and they both spoke. You remember the name of the nanny? Sandra Samuel? At the funeral, the prime minister shared that Sandra would become a full citizen of Israel. It's not always easy to become a full citizen of Israel. And further, he announced that Yad Vashem, Israel's Museum of the Holocaust, was honoring her with the tree in the garden of the righteous nations of the world. Sandra Samuel had been in Israel 12 hours. She was soon to become a citizen and a righteous Gentile, one of the greatest honors that the Jewish people can bestow. I want to share with you a concluding thought, but before I do, I want to say that as I was preparing this sermon and thinking about what I was going to share with you, I couldn't help but think about Daphne Meir. Daphne Meir was murdered this week in her home on the West Bank. You probably know of the story, and I won't go into the details at the moment. You may also know, or may not, that she grew up in a foster home. And when she got married, she told her husband, Natan, that no matter how many children they had, she also wanted to have foster children. They have 4 biological children and 2 foster children. And it's not possible for me to speak tonight without every hope that her memory will be a blessing to all who mourn for her while God cradles her soul. We can learn some important moral lessons from Pharaoh's daughter, and we can learn some important moral lessons from Sandra Samuel, indeed for all the non-Jews who have gone out of their way to be moral and decent people. The first lesson for the Jewish people is we are not alone. The whole world is not against us. And the second lesson is that Jewish people know how to show gratitude to those who show kindness to us. From the times of the Bible, when midwives like Shiphrah and Puah, who were Egyptian midwives, went against the ruler and saved the lives of Israelite children, to this day, Jews name their daughters Shiphrah. Puah, not so popular for reasons which are probably obvious, but Shiphrah is a beautiful and popular name. And we also remember the Gentiles in this century who during the Shoah risked their lives to save Jews. We remember and we honor. So tonight, let's remember the young woman, the daughter of Pharaoh, who our rabbis, our sages, gave the name Batia. We remember that she rescued this baby Moses. She was among the first of the righteous Gentiles. And 3,200 years later, we can add another righteous Gentile to our memory, Sandra Samuels, for rescuing a young child who also had the name Moses. And by the way, she continues to be the boy's nanny in Israel to this day. And may that little boy, Moses, like his namesake, grow up to be a light unto his people. And may Sandra Samuels, like the daughter of Pharaoh, be remembered by all of us for saving our children. Amen.